but then only kind of read little sections of it. But this time we're going to read from verse 13 of chapter 27 all the way through to verse 10 of chapter 28. So if you'd like to turn there, that would be great. So from verse 13, so this is Acts 27. A gentle south wind began to blow, and they thought that they had attained what they wanted. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, called the northeaster, swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. When the men hoisted it aboard, they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. Fearing that they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After the men had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed." Last night an angel of the God whose I am, and whom I serve, stood beside me and said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island." On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, when about midnight the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later they took soundings and found it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the officers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it fall away. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. "For the last 14 days, he said, you have been in constant suspense, and you have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head." After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether there were 276 of us on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach, where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea, and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail back to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bows stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept him from carrying out the plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on pieces of the ship. And this way everyone reached land in safety. Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as as he put it on the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to survive." But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effect. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead, but after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. There was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home and for 3 days entertained us hospitably. His father was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went in to see him, and after prayer placed his hands on him and healed him. When this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. They honoured us in many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies we needed. So I've got 3 kind of main points this morning. The first one I call "The Storms Are Coming." The storm's coming, and you might be thinking, "Oh, I've had enough storms actually." But what we realise as we read this passage and as we follow the life of Paul is that storms in life are actually sort of unavoidable. And actually, it's almost a promise from Jesus that there will be storms. He says, in this world you will have trouble. I'm sure lots of people might have their ideal for what life might look like as a Christian. I don't know what that might be for you. Just that you at all times feel at peace and calm, that God provides for your every need. You get your kind of ideal house, ideal job, you're able to be good to other people and care for them, but you just live with a sort of sense of peace and joy from day to day, and you're full of discipline, and each morning you joyfully wake up and spend time in prayer and reading the Bible, and day by day grow in a kind of glow of a halo above you that people see Jesus in you. And some of those things are good things to hope for, but the reality is that Christian life can be a lot different from that. And that is quite simply that the fact is we live in a spiritual battle. Jesus preaches, repent for the kingdom of God is near and is come. And the whole message of Jesus is that his kingdom is invading the kingdom of this world. And the world as we know it, because of the fall, men and women who were given dominion over creation, because of sin, handed that over to Satan. And so he runs riot in people's lives. And we ourselves and those around us end up being affected by all sorts of things, and by our own sin. And so part of us becomes affected by all sorts of difficulties and struggles, as we kind of give in to the flesh, and as people around us give into the flesh, and the world kind of continues into a state of disarray, and that is the kind of understanding of the fall. And as a result, because people are kind of turning away from God, they open themselves to all other influences, spiritually and otherwise, and these influences take advantage of our sin and twist things, cause trouble in our lives, in the life of other people around us. And so Jesus' message is repent or turn away from sin, because the kingdom of God is near, and he wants people to turn away from their kind of negative choices and instead be open to God. And because of him dying on the cross, he makes that possible for us to escape from being slaves to sin, and he frees us to a life with God, where God's kingdom starts to work in our life, and shape us and mould us and create something different in us. But nonetheless, we still live in a world which is kind of controlled and under the influence of the evil one, because all around us there's people in situations which don't involve repentance, and people haven't turned from sin, and so they've handed over control to all sorts of influences. And the result is that as people and as Christians, it's unavoidable that there will be troubles in this world, because as we look to follow Jesus, we end up challenging values and morals and strongholds of the kind of world around us. And people might not like that, and also the kind of powers that have taken advantage, Satan and the other powers that have taken advantage of people's sin, don't like it either, and so they'll thrash and cause problems and create all kinds of storms around us. And so that's what you see in the kind of life of Paul all throughout the book of Acts. You've seen him go through storms, figuratively speaking, just with people accusing him, and people trying to beat him or lock him up, abuse him in all different ways when he is standing for Jesus. And it's likely because they just don't like what he's saying, and they're not willing to repent, and they're not willing to accept Jesus. And so he goes through all sorts of storms. But then also creation itself is affected by sin, and so around us there's all kind of things happen. And so Paul even finds himself in a storm on the boat, and they're in danger of their lives. And this is where we can pick up in chapter 28. So, us ourselves in a similar way, although we might hope for an easy life, and that we kind of sometimes might think, oh, maybe if I trust God, give my life to Him, everything in my life will be sorted out. Well, there will be things that are sorted out, and there will be some things that are healed, and He'll definitely move at work in our hearts, and as we trust in Him, bring a sense of hope and of peace, and we will see degrees of healing and wholeness, freedom. But at the same time, we'll still live in the world that we're in, and until there's a new creation, that won't fully change. And so, like Paul, will find ourselves in the midst of storms or difficulties, and all around us we'll find people possibly misunderstanding us, upset at us, not realising why we're doing things that we're doing, and we'll basically go through lots of different difficulties. So I hope you're feeling inspired to continue in your faith. However, what we see in this passage, and moving on to the second point, is that what we can learn from Paul is how are we in the storm? How are we in the storm? How do we behave in the storm? How do we react to the storm? You may another sort of thing that confuses people is that we have the kind of story of Jesus calming the storm. And so maybe sometimes when we find ourselves in a difficult place or going through difficulties or in the midst of a storm, and we cry out to God, we just kind of we're expecting, okay, that He'll calm the storm. But here there's another story, of course, where there's a storm, and the storm isn't calmed. But what does happen is that Paul behaves in a certain way in the storm, and he sort of responds in a certain way. And so it may be that at times when we're going through difficulties and we cry out to God, He'll change things, the circumstances, and stop certain things happening to us or certain problems that we're going through. But there might be other times when we cry out to Him and He doesn't change the storm, but He might change something in us so that we start to respond in a different way. And so there's a few kind of things that we see in Paul and the way that he responds to this storm. And firstly, you see that he maintains a trust in God. But interestingly, his trust isn't necessarily that they'll be rescued from the storm. I mean, he says to them, well, actually, we're going to be shipwrecked. So he trusts God that they're going to be shipwrecked. But in the midst of that, he does somehow sense that they're all going to be saved, even though they're going to have to go through that trouble. So Paul has a sense of trust, but it's only really trust in what God shows him is going to happen. He's also encouraging to those around, and so you see in verse 22 that he kind of talks to them and said to them, I urge you, keep up your courage, not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed. And then he goes on to say that an angel of God spoke to him and asked him not to be afraid. And he will go to Caesar and testify to him. So keep up your courage. And actually that's probably the one similarity between the calming of the storm and this story where the disciple just goes through the storm. And that is this idea of not being afraid. Because at the calming of the storm, when it's calm, Jesus says to them, well, why were you afraid? And here there's an angel who says, don't be afraid. So the kind of one constant is actually there seems to be this promise or that there's a degree of peace that can come when we trust in God that allows us to overcome fear in any circumstance. Whether it might be that the storm is calmed or it might not be, but either way, Jesus wants to bring peace and freedom from fear. So Paul's encouraging. He remains rooted in God's word and listening to God. He speaks God's words and he speaks out to those around him. And he might have been tempted to be all panicking and fearful, kind of crying to God, God, why am I in this situation? But instead, he stays focused, he stays trusting, and he speaks encouragingly to those around him. And it's interesting that he actually becomes almost like a leader in a situation, although he's actually a prisoner. And so he's actually giving advice to the people that have got him captive, technically. So despite the storm that he's in, he responds in such a way that he is able to keep calm, he trusts in God. He doesn't allow fear to overcome him. He actually becomes a leader to those around him. They're also going through this situation. And so there's, I suppose, a reminder for us to, when we're going through difficulties, to respond in a way that inspires and leads other people. He also continues to have a kind of wisdom about him. He keeps his head, and so he's aware of what's going on around about him, and he sees that the sailors are going to try and sneak off with the lifeboat to save himself, so that all the prisoners and the Romans guards are all going to be left in the boat and basically all die. And so he's kind of aware of that, and he points that out to the centurion, and so they cut off the ropes that hold the lifeboat, and so that floats off. So he ends up saving the lives of all the Roman soldiers and the prisoners. So he has a kind of wisdom about him. Similarly, in verse 33, he urges them to eat. So they've all been trying to hold back from the food so that it would last. But he says to them, no, now's the time that we need to eat. So he has a wisdom in the kind of situation that he finds himself in. He also kind of maintains a love of people around him, and even actually his enemies. So he's a captive of the soldiers, but he's looking out for them. And then when the sailors try to run off with the lifeboat, they were obviously going to abandon Paul and everybody else to their doom, but actually Paul still looks out for them and works out how everybody can be saved. So he doesn't respond with anger or hatred, but still looking to be there for each person. And also, I suppose, another thing that he does is he is trusting, but he's realistic. So he has a faith in God, and he's trusting that God is going to ultimately save him. But then he still takes practical steps at the same time. So he trusts that God will look after them, but then he's telling them, okay, right, you all need to eat food, because you're all going to have to swim, basically, to the beach. And so he's encouraging them to take practical steps that work with God bringing rescue. And I think there's something that we can kind of learn in that as well, because sometimes in a situation of some kind of storm or difficulty, we might be crying out to God to save us or to take us forward. But actually he expects us to also do everything that we can to put ourselves in a place to be saved. Like, I'm sure you've probably heard the story of a person who was in a flood and they were on the roof of a building and they're crying out to God, oh God, rescue me. And then a helicopter comes past and somebody like lowers a rope down and they're saying climb on up, and the person on the house is like, oh no, and God's going to rescue me actually, but they don't get on it. And then like another, someone on a boat rows past and they're like, climb on the boat, and they're like, well no, actually God's going to rescue me. And it kind of goes on like this. I don't actually know what the end of the story is. I hope they didn't drown. But if someone else remembers the story. Oh, great. But the point was, you need to make sort of realistic decisions as well in the midst. And that's why, for example, when we're trusting God to provide for us as a church, and we're asking for Him to provide, for example, for Liam staying here, at the same time we take practical steps, we look to fundraise, we look to use the gifts that God has given us, because God provides for us through these things, and He expects us to work with Him and to use what He's given us. So, how are we in the storm? When we're going through difficulties, we're not to be tempted to kind of give in to all our fears and our worries and to become negative or critical or angry with God in a sense, because He's not actually necessarily promised to always take us out of difficulties, but what He does promise is to be with us, and He calls us to react in a certain way. So He calls us to continue to be focused on Him. He calls us to be encouraging to others, to be rooted in Him, to listen to Him. He calls us to be wise. He calls us to remain loving. And He calls us to be trusting, realistic. And so Paul does all these things. And eventually the boat breaks apart, and they have to go through the trauma of swimming to the shore, no doubt choking in seawater, and eventually they all make it to the shore, and they're probably looking around wondering who's made it. And actually all of them survive, which is what God had promised them in the first place. So they find themselves on the shore, on an island called Malta. And it says interestingly, verse 1, where it says, I read, once safely on shore. The actual Greek says, sort of having been saved. So as they're kind of arriving on the shore, they have a sense of safety, and they're finally made it. They feel like they've been rescued, they feel safe. The name for Malta that was given by the local people back in the day was also called refuge. That's how it was translated. So there's a real kind of sense of arriving at a place of refuge. And then they're surrounded by these islanders that show them an unusual kindness. And so they build a fire, and everyone's been welcoming, and they're all kind of recovering and no doubt looking forward to getting some food in them. And this sort of brings me to my third point, and it's probably the one that most spoke to me actually this week, so I was thinking reading through these passages, and that was the point, beware of vipers. So beware of vipers, because here they think they're saved, they think they've got to like a place of safety, and then Paul, probably another thing you could have said about his character, even in the midst of difficulty, is that he remains servant-hearted. So he goes off to get a pile of brushwood, and he brings it back, and then he puts it on the fire, and a viper comes out and bites him, just when he thinks he's safe. Everybody's left wondering, is Paul going to die here? And the local people are thinking, he must have been somebody terrible, that he's managed to go all the way through a storm, finally get to safety, and then something else terrible happens to him. And he himself may well have been tempted to be sort of crying to God, why on earth has this happened to me now? And to sort of panic or be fearful, as just when he thinks he's got free of something else happens to him. And it kind of reminded me of a couple of things actually. First, if you think of a story in the Bible where there's a serpent that comes and brings problems, when people seem to be in a good place, you might think right back to the Garden of Eden, where the serpent appears and tempts Adam and Eve, and they end up eating of the fruit, and that's where things go wrong. And as I was thinking about that, it reminded me of Jesus after his baptism, where he's tempted, and the accuser comes and tries to throw him off what God has called him to do. And here we have a situation where again a snake or a viper comes, and there's a possibility for Paul to be disrupted. But interestingly, Paul just manages to shake this serpent off, and he shakes it off into the fire and suffers no ill effect. And although people expected him to drop dead, he doesn't. And actually, because of the way he responds, people looking on change their minds and think he must be a god. And he no doubt went on to kind of share with them about the gospel and who he really was, and about Jesus. And then he goes on to this place of healing, praying for people, and lots of people being healed from different illnesses. And sometimes we can go through difficulties, and then it's finally over, and we think we're safe, and then something else happens. There's another viper that comes and bites us, and that can be really discouraging. And often a kind of place of exhaustion, where you're tired out from being sick, or you've just come through something, Satan will come along and try and tempt you with something, or bring some difficulty that just it's like a snake coming and biting you. But how do we respond to that? We could let it get us down, we could kind of get depressed, and we could give up. We think, I thought God, you had rescued me from one situation, and now there's another one. But actually, in this story, Paul just shakes it off, and he doesn't allow it to throw him off, but he maintains his sense of trust in God. And as he does that, God saves him. He doesn't die from it. It's not as bad as he thought it might be. Because he perseveres, he's able to be a witness to those around him, and people are kind of surprised, and they realise there's something different about him, and he gets the opportunity to go on and to share with them, and ends up being able to pray with people. And see God at work in their lives. So similarly for us, the way that we respond to difficulties, the way that we respond to these kind of vipers that come out and bite us when we're at a place of vulnerability, will also be a point of potential witness as well. And people will see how we respond to that. Whether we're able to shake it off, maintain our faith, or whether we allow it to kind of throw us off completely. But also it kind of keeps us from a sense of, I'm trying to think of the right word, I guess false sense of security. You know, Paul had sort of arrived safely on the shore, so they thought, having been saved. But it didn't mean that Satan wasn't still out after them to try and throw them off. And so sometimes when we've changed some things in our life, we've been rescued from a situation, we maybe think, okay, everything's going to be perfect now, and I can live life the way I always wanted it to be. But that's not the way life is in a sense. There's always going to be little things that will come and try to throw you off, and that's just part of life. But as Christians, we're to persevere, to trust in God despite these things. Whether it's a temptation, whether it's some difficulty that comes, to keep our eyes fixed on God, what He calls us to be. And as we do that, despite the difficulties, that's when we see God at work in those around us. And so Paul, even though he's gone through all this stuff, through the storm, the shipwreck, then he thinks he's safe, and then he's bitten by a snake, but through everything he keeps faith in God. And as he keeps faith, he then finally gets to a point where there's a period in his life where he's ministering again in a kind of miraculous way, and lots of people's lives being impacted. So I hope this kind of part of the story of Paul is encouraging. It might be challenging because as Christians we need to realise there are always going to be storms. But maybe also it might help you because if you're going through difficulties, it's not necessarily because there's something wrong with you, or that God's angry with you, or that you brought something on you. It's just that we live in a broken world. We do have a choice though, and that is how we respond to whatever situation we're in, and how we act. Will we act in a godly way, as Paul responded, keep faith in God? And then, even if we're surprised by another thing going wrong, something else going wrong, will we blame that on God? Will we give up? Or will we keep faith? Continue to point others to Jesus? Because when we do, He will touch their lives, and there will be power at work in them, and the power of salvation. And I suppose in my own life as a minister, I sometimes wonder, people maybe wonder what life is like as a minister. I wake up at a good time every day, go and sit outside and peacefully have a coffee, and later on in the afternoon, having read the Bible for a few hours, go and have a coffee and cake with someone, and then get myself ready for church on Sunday. That would be lovely if each week was kind of like this. But I can assure you that there's lots of things that go on, and lots of difficulties and struggles. Sometimes my own ones, sometimes coming alongside other people. And Christian life for me and for each one of you is always going to be full of difficulties and struggles. But I suppose the question is, how do we act in the midst of them? Do we respond in the right way? Do we act in a godly way? Do we speak in a godly way? Do we maintain trust? Because actually, Jesus doesn't promise anything less or anything more than that we will have troubles, because we live in between the times when we stand for a kingdom that is invading the kingdom of this world. So that creates a kind of disturbance and a conflict. So that's where we live at this present time. But as we maintain trust, we will see Jesus' kingdom making a difference in people's lives around us. And as a minister, although there's lots of difficulties and struggles and tears and frustrations, at the same time we also see God healing people's lives, touching people's lives, bringing transformation, and that's what God promises. Shall we pray together? Lord, we think of your words in this world, you will have trouble. But then, Lord, we also think of your words, I will be with you always, even until the end of the age. Lord, we just want to renew our faith in you this morning and our trust in you. Lord, you know each person and the difficulties they might be going through, storms that might be raging. And Lord, I pray that you would bring a sense of your presence into each of these situations. Lord, help us not to be fearful, but help us instead to trust that you are with us. Lord, help us to, in the midst of these things, remain calm. Help us to be encouraging to those around us. Help us to listen to you, be ready to share your words with others. Help us to be wise. Help us to lead others in the midst of difficulties. Lord, help us to be practical and realistic, to trust in you, but also to take whatever steps we can in whatever situation we find ourselves in to bring resolution. And Lord, we thank you that you will ultimately bring us through every difficulty. And so we trust you for that, even though it might be that that is a difficult and a painful process, just as it was for Paul and the others in this shipwreck. And Lord, I pray for others this morning who maybe gone through a lot of difficulties, and a whole big storm, and they maybe finally got to a place of where they seemed like they were safe and things were better, and then out of nowhere a viper comes and bites them, and the evil one tempts them to despair or to give up. And Lord, I pray that you would be with people in that situation. You'd help them to shake it off and to maintain trust in you. And Lord, we thank you that as we keep our trust in you, in the midst of storms, you allow us to be a witness. And also you'll bring us to other periods after these things where we will see you work in miraculous ways, bringing healing and wholeness. And Lord, we just want to worship you this morning and express our praise of you and our love for you. Lord, we don't want to blame you for the difficulties because we're aware that we live in a broken world into which your kingdom is coming. And that's why we pray that in the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Lord, help us to keep faith and to continue to live each day opening ourselves to you, to the power of your Spirit. And as we do so, Lord, we trust that people will see that in us. They'll see that we respond differently. And Lord, that will raise questions in them as well. And they will have an openness to you. So Lord, we just thank you for this passage and the lessons that we can learn. And Lord, we trust our lives to you. Help us to not be fearful, but to always trust in you and to always represent you, whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. So we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're going to come to